All right, we're live. GM, GA, everybody. Welcome to what's going to be another great DevNTell. So if you didn't know, DevNTell is a 30-minute window for builders to showcase something they're passionate about or have been working on in Web3. This can be an awesome project we've been working on, demonstrating unit testing best practices, automation goodies, smart contracts, how to structure a project, etc. Basically, if you've got a passion for something, this is your opportunity to share it with the community here. And today I am ecstatic to introduce to you Nicholas, who will be giving us a overview of SVG on-chain smart contracts that he's built for Juicebox. And Nicholas, welcome. Maybe you want to start off with a brief introduction about yourself, and yeah, can take it from there.
Thanks. Thank you for having me, Narb. Yeah, it's great to be here and to hang out with some DevDAO folks. Yeah, if you don't know me, my name is Nicholas. I'm on Twitter with the name Nicholas with 4 leading N's, where I talk all about crypto stuff, Web3 stuff, usually an Ethereum focus, but EVM in general. Spend a lot of time thinking about NFTs and DAOs and the mixture of the two. I host a podcast on Twitter Spaces every Friday called Web3 Galaxy Brain, which you can check out at web3galaxybrain.com. And about 6 weeks ago, I started doing a second show on Wednesday afternoons with my friend Django, who is also a contributor at Juicebox DAO, where we talk about NFT tokenomics and have a kind of office hours workshopping session for people who are coming through Juicebox Discord or just generally in the DAO and NFT scene who want to chit chat about the tokenomics for their next drop or their next DAO project that they're working on. And that's actually been very interesting. We've had some great guests, Jin from Open Voxels, Dr. Slurp, who's a successful on-chain NFT artist, and his partner Cookie Tree, and lots of other people come through. So that's been a lot of fun too. So I do some communication stuff around developer relations and on-chain dev stuff. And inside of Juicebox, I work on governance, operations. Lately, I've been doing design stuff related to our governance tooling, a tool called Nance, which maybe I'll show off in the future. And lately, the latest project that's sort of the first version is being finished up right now is what I'm going to show today, which is this token URI resolver. So maybe I'll switch over to presenting and describe the project a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
So I thought we could start off by looking at this JB project. So basically, so for people who aren't familiar, Juicebox is, well, let's jump over very quickly, juicebox.money. So Juicebox is an on-chain treasury protocol that allows you to, in its most simple case, collect funds and spend those funds, most famously Constitution DAO, Moon DAO, and Assange DAO used it in a very basic way. But more deep operational applications of the protocol allow you to essentially state upfront how you're going to use the funds that you collect before you collect them, defining things like how much you have access to, at what frequency, and who you'll be paying, and making all of those parameters explicit on chain so that people can see in advance before they make a contribution how the funds will be used. So like if you're interested in that, someone like Chris Black is using the protocol in a really exemplary way where he only has access to $5,000 every 2 weeks, I believe is his cycle duration. Yeah, 14 days. So every 2 weeks he gets $5,000. No matter how much he raises, that's how much he has access to every 2 weeks. So it's just an example of how Juicebox works. So every Juicebox project is represented by an NFT, and whoever holds that NFT can control the project, can change what's called the funding cycle configuration, which is to say all the parameters about how funds are collected, spent, and tokens issued. So in order to achieve composability, the protocol's design is such that whoever has the project NFT, there's one NFT representing each project, whoever holds that NFT can configure the project. So this makes it composable with EOA wallets, but also multi-sigs, etc. And all of those NFTs live inside of this JB projects contract. And the JB project contract is a pretty straightforward contract that has some affordances that make sense for the protocol so that other contracts in the protocol's architecture can talk to it and verify, for instance, that the correct person owns it in order to decide who can make changes to the project's parameters. But as a consequence of them all being NFTs, they all have NFT metadata, which you can see on OpenSea. However, the protocol thus far has not had any metadata applied to it. So all the projects are here, but they have no name, they have no image, they have no properties, and even the project overall, the collection overall has no metadata either. But the protocol is engineered in such a way that we can change that using this set token URI resolver function, which allows us to set any contract that conforms to this IJB token URI resolver interface, which has just one function, a get URI function, and returns the token URI. So any contract that conforms to this can be set as the token URI resolver for the whole protocol. So every project here will eventually get metadata if that token URI resolver is set. So that sort of explains the context for what we're doing here. The goal of this project was to create a contract that could be set as the token URI resolver to give all of the Juicebox projects their own metadata. I decided to take on a design that would surface some of the protocols. So if you see here, like let's say Juicebox, every project has a treasury, which has a balance. It has a volume that it has raised total and a bunch of other parameters. Excuse me, a bunch of other parameters like the total number of tokens that have been issued relative to that project, etc. We can go into the details another day. So what I wanted to do was to create a, actually, maybe I could even pull it up on Figma. I wanted to create a on-chain token URI resolver that would surface data about the protocol live. Let me see, it's way back in my history. Where is it? Well, if I can't find it, no big deal. I was going to show you the earliest version of this. Let's see. Yeah, so here are some of the early versions of it. I was thinking of doing, historically, we used a monospaced font on the website. So I thought it would be cool to do something that looked sort of like those old CRT command line interfaces with that orange aesthetic, something inspired by this, but surfacing data about the current real-time status of the project. So this would be an example name of the project, what funding cycle it's in, how many days are left in its funding cycle, and some stats about it. So I went through a few different iterations of this, and the idea was that it would be monospaced font, so I could decide the number of characters in each row explicitly, and then do some on-chain string concatenation and clever padding work to come up with the right layout so that it would always look good no matter what project it was being applied to. And ultimately, I resolved on something pretty much like this. This was the, I guess, the last version of the mock-ups that I did. There's some other ideas for future versions here. So the version that I ultimately came up with was the following. So this image shows the Juicebox project. It's actually, if the browser supports it, like OpenSea might not allow this, but the SVG that I'm generating here actually has href tags. So the Juicebox title is a link to the Juicebox page. Also, the project owner is a link to the Etherscan page for that address. And we see some stats about the live status of the project. So what funding cycle it's in, how many days are left in the funding cycle, the balance of the project treasury right now, how much of it is overflow, which is a technical detail of Juicebox that we can discuss later in questions if there are any. The distribution limit, which is how much can be spent, the total supply of the token relative to this project, and of course, who owns the project. And in future versions, I toyed with this a little, but I didn't get it fully working in time for this demo, but I'd like this to resolve the ENS name of this address if there is one, which in this case there is. I don't know if it's going to show it here, but there is one for this multisig. In any case, this is the file. And to take a closer look at that file, we can look at how it looks in the SVG viewer website. So basically, this is an SVG that has a big chunk and style tag up front. And here I'm importing this is a base64 encoded font or typeface, and specifically a font, the 500 weight capsules typeface. Capsules is an on-chain NFT collection by a friend of mine, Peripheralist, who's also a contributor at Juicebox DAO via another DAO called Peel. And this is his project to create this on-chain typography and allow people to mint the fonts. Uploading V7, we're uploading the different weights to the chain, to Ethereum mainnet. And then there's a collection of 7,000 or so NFTs that can use these fonts in their NFTs. So the consequence of this this collection is that this capsule's typeface is on-chain. So in my SVG, I'm importing the capsule's typeface, which is already on-chain and base64 encoded, and I'm using it in a style tag so that the text in these images and these SVGs is all using a font that is stored on-chain. So I don't need Google Fonts API or Adobe fonts, and I don't need to care about the OS that is loading this image. It'll always load with the correct font because the font is stored on Ethereum, which is pretty crazy and pretty cool. Subsequent to the style tag, we have some, I've prettified this, but in the actual SVG, it's not laid out like this. There's no spaces, etc. But we have a hand manicured version of the SVG that I drew originally in Figma, which I've manually reduced to as little as possible or close to it. And you can see we have these tags. I'm using the, where is it? The pre, somewhere here, yeah, white space pre style tag, which allows me to use spaces as padding for generating the text so that it lays out correctly. And we'll look at in a second the functions that I've got in my contracts that are padding all this stuff. It's a little bit gnarly, but it does get the job done. And you can even see here concatenating in the Etherscan link to the address that owns the thing. I've also got some filters, which are giving it that like glowy look. I don't know if you can zoom in a little bit, but it's got a little bit of a glow to it. Oops, I clicked the link. Oh, hold on. Give me a second. I'm gonna have to go grab it again because SVG Viewer does that thing. Any questions while I look for this?
How big are the fonts that are stored on chain? Because that's pretty sick.
Good question.
Yeah.
Good question. Look how terrible they've made search in the latest Mac update. How big are the fonts? That's a good question. I don't know offhand. It cost me, I uploaded one of them. In the capsules collection, he did a very cool thing where there were colors for each of the NFTs, and the pure value colors for the 7 extremes of the color chart were all uploading. The NFTs were free, but you paid the gas to upload the file, and his contract was able to hash the uploaded content and compare it to a known value hash of the existing files that he expected you to upload to make sure that you were uploading the right thing. So he got his collectors, including me and a few other people here you can see, to spend the gas to upload them. So I'm using the 500 weight one. So I think, oh no, I guess that goes to Kenny. I'm not sure if we can jump right to the thing, but anyway, I'll look later during question period for how much it was, but I think it was about it was under 1 ETH. I think it was 0.1 or 0.3 ETH, something like that, to upload each of the font weights because they're all different files.
Gotcha.
So I was looking for this thing. Yeah, here we go. So yeah, we were just finishing up looking at this. So the filters give the color and some of the glowing effect. And frankly, these are things that I just grabbed from the Figma file. I'm not totally sure how they all work. Although I will tell you one debugging thing that I had to struggle with during the process was that this was really not rendering correctly in Safari. And the solution ultimately was to not use whitespace pre-wrap, but instead to switch to pre, because Safari does not correctly render all of the CSS tags in SVGs. In SVGs, they don't honor every aspect of the CSS style tags. So switching to pre solved my problem where they were all jumbled on the left side. So if you're doing on-chain SVG, that might happen to you. So that's kind of an overview of how the SVG works. So now we can take a look at the contract. So at first I wrote this this contract, which ultimately got renamed to default token URI resolver. But this is the contract that does a lot of the heavy lifting. In the end, it got shuttled off into a separate contract. But at first, this was the only contract there was, and we can take a quick look at it. So basically, I import a lot of different libraries, things relative to Juicebox that I need to discover all the on-chain metadata that I'd like to incorporate into the NFTs. Then I have this string slicer contract. The reason this is not an internal function to the actual contract is because I need to pass it a string memory and call it to use this array slices function, this little magic here, which can only be done on call data, not on memory, like not on a memory string. So I had to put it in a separate contract, and that's why it's at the top of this file. Then we've got the main contract, where I bring in the slicer tool that I just described and some events that I'm going to use, and I declare all these values that I'm going to make use of later on. I also have this themes thing, which we can take a look in a minute, but you can keep that in mind that there's a mapping of project ID to theme. I do the constructor, set up the whole, all of the values that I just described above, and discover some others that can be discovered on chain by doing lookups, trying to reduce as many as possible the number of constructor arguments. Although of course I could just hard code in all of these values in here, and I think that's one thing that in the future I'd like to tighten up even further to make this discovery of other contracts addresses even more executed on chain at deploy time. Or even at lookup time for the ones that can change. I also set a default theme here, which just describes some colors. Those are the orange and brown colors in the image that you saw earlier. This function get font goes and grabs the base64 encoded typeface that I was looking for, and I'm using here the capsules typeface. This is an address of the contract that I know in advance. Then we start to get into some of the more gnarly padding stuff. So these padding functions I use in order to, I define if it's left padding or right padding. I give it the string that I'd like to pad, and I give it the target length. And I'm using this in order to generate essentially 15 characters on the left side, and 50, I believe it's 15 if I recall correctly. This part I did a little while ago, and 15 on the right, so that regardless of the length of the value that I get here, it adds the correct number of spaces here so that it fits in correctly, and vice versa for these ones. I add spaces here so that I sort of do them half-half, the left side and the right side, split down the middle. And I also do things like I think this adding an ellipsis if the value is very long, which comes into play especially for things like total supply. That's how that works. So I won't belabor this because I know we're already running short on time. So essentially there's this padding function, which does a lot of nasty stuff to come up with the appropriate length string it can return. I have these helper functions like get project name, which rely on another contract called project handles, also by Peripheralist, the creator of that typeface, which and other collaborators who helped improve the code. And this is what gives Juicebox projects like this name here, which is based on an ENS handle that Juicebox project owners can associate with their project. So I wanted to pull those in, and this code goes and grabs them. If there is nothing, then it just uses the project's number and concatenates in the ID number of the project. But if there is a handle, it uses that handle like you saw there, add Juicebox above. Here are some more helper functions, which I won't describe in detail, but you get the idea that these are all allowing me to generate the elements of the text that go into the SVG. So get left padded time, left padded time left. Maybe you could do a little bit of improving on the names there, but you can see that these are figuring out, depending on the funding cycle duration left, it adds in the space hours or space days or minutes. And it does some logic to figure out how to do that, including like some intelligent or maybe somewhat intelligent if else statements to determine if it's like should be plural essentially. FC time left row is that where is it? Is that funding cycle number? And balance distribution. Now we're getting into these here. I'll skim through these and jump down to, so these are just more helper functions, total supply, theming we'll get to in a minute. And now we get to the real meat of the contract, which is this get URI function. So this is the function that IJB token URI resolver, the interface that this contract must correspond to, has to have this one function. And so I first check if there's a theme set. And if there isn't, we just use the default theme. Then I go and grab all of the relevant like contracts to this particular project, because different projects can set different contracts that they interact with in the Juicebox protocol. I go and check if it's got an ERC20 associated with it. And then I start concatenating all of the values to start creating the SVG. So here we've got the project owner, you can see. Here I'm grabbing their address. Don't yet have the ENS stuff in, so that will come in later. And then here I start concatenating the overall metadata blob that you're going to get back when you call that token URI function on the JD project. So you can see here I'm starting to create I'm going to base64 encode the whole of the whole of the metadata JSON. And then here I start declaring the metadata. So I've got the name, the project's name, and this is the descriptive metadata, like textual descriptive metadata that OpenSea will populate into text fields, for example. I'm also concatenating in things like how much ETH is in the treasury, the overflow, directly into the description text that'll be in OpenSea and other NFT viewers. Then when we get to the image tag, we break off again and start doing the more complicated part, which is concatenating in all of the data we got from the chain, from like real-time on-chain data, into the SVG. So I've broken up, I've done this way. I'm sure there are other ways of doing this, but I've just taken the SVG that we looked at earlier and essentially cut it off at all the parts where I need, for instance, the font. So, font, true type, whatever its name is, capsules, and here's the base64 encoded font, and I have that helper function that goes and grabs it from the corresponding contract composably on-chain elsewhere. Then we have things like the theming that gets plugged in. So we're using the default theme right now. We have the link for the project. So I just use we have this functionality on the juicebox.money website. So just drop in the project's ID there. Then we have the project's name. So this would be this part up here. And that will already have been decided in that helper function, whether it is at Juicebox or whatever project we're looking at, or the project's ID number if it has no name set. And then I'm going and grabbing from all of these different helper functions, the balance, etc. And I've broken them up with comments here, so you can see there's like overflow. We have a text element that's 96 pixels down from the top of the image, top of the SVG. And then I'm going to pull in the overflow row, which depends on the overflow string. The overflow row here, and in all of these, you can see a similar kind of pattern. The overflow row just introduces the label, and then the overflow string introduces the value and some spaces around it. That's how those work, and you can see we're doing like line by line. So maybe you could think of this SVG as a kind of programmerly mindset about how to construct an image. There are other on-chain SVG projects that are not so like straightforward in how they're constructing their SVG. But this is helpful for me because there's so many different projects that the data, sort of normalizing the data across them by doing things like abbreviating them if they have too long of a value was a concern of mine. However, that could have been avoided by just doing them, each value on its own row potentially. So that's it. We finish up the string, got the owner. the owner's name, and then I have some other values down here in the filter area for the themes. Excuse me. Finally, we finish up the big string, the SVG, and the JSON ends there. And then we concatenate all those different parts, the sort of prefix, and then the SVG's data, which gets base64 encoded after that base64 prefix, because we return some nested base64 encoded data. Like, for instance, the typeface is base64 encoded inside of the SVG, which is base64 encoded inside of the JSON, which is base64 encoded. So when OpenSea or whomever asks for the token URI, they get this base64 encoded blob, and they have to decode it and then decode again to get down to the ultimate SVG that we were looking at a moment ago. And then down here, we've just got some helper functions. To ASCII string helps to, actually, there was one thing I wanted to talk about here. Unicode I use here. It's necessary if you're going to use things like this element and this element, or if you were going to use emojis. And these are just some helper functions that allow for string manipulation and switching between different types of values, which is useful for creating this thing. So that's how it works. It has a pretty good README. It's currently sitting in a branch on this token URI resolver. Where is it? GitHub. Sorry, token resolver, GitHub. In a PR. So it'll be in the main in the next week or so. But if you want to check it out today, you can check it out here at JBX Protocol, Juice Token Resolver, and then Migrating from Old Repo is the name of the branch. And I have a pretty extensive README about how you can test it on your own. There is a little change to the protocol in the last week that has caused it to fail because one of the contract addresses has changed since this was last updated. So I'll be changing that probably later today. But if you want, you can run these tests. One other interesting thing about this is that almost all of the testing I'm doing is mainnet forking. So you can, and the reason for that is that it relies on the protocol extensively, and it's kind of a pain to deploy both the protocol, create projects on the protocol, fund those projects, and then also set up, redeploy ENS and grab an ENS name and then associate a project handle with a project. It was just too much work to try and figure out to do all that. So I've been doing all of this through mainnet testing. And if you're interested in doing that, one thing I suggest is to, obviously this is all done with Forge, as you can see from here. And this is really the guts of the command that you need to do to test it. I highly suggest fork block number because Forge will cache that the block data, so you don't need to re-download it every time you want to test. So that reduces the testing time significantly. I'm also using via IR because there's a lot of data moving around. And I'm using FFI, which I'll show you in a second how that's being used. I know we're coming up on the time. So one thing I wanted to explain before we finish up is that at the about midway through the process of creating this thing, there was an architectural change to, instead of just hard coding this contract as the token URI resolver, I switched based on a conversation with Peripheralist to having this become the default token URI resolver that is a dependency of the token URI resolver, which is really just a much simpler contract and a registry contract. So in this token URI resolver, and this is ultimately what will be set on that JB project as the token URI resolver, I have a mapping of uints or project IDs to resolvers. If the projects have no custom resolver set, then it uses the default token URI resolver, which is what we looked at earlier. However, this lets us both update the default resolver if I want to change something about how that SVG is created. I can deploy a new one and just associate it as the default on this contract here. Where's the default one? Somewhere here. Every project that doesn't have a custom one set will be updated with that new default resolver. But at the same time, any project can come in and create their own on-chain or off-chain resolver, deploy a contract. It could rely on IPFS or something else, and they can use this contract to set their token resolver for their project. it does a little check to make sure that they have permission to do so using functionality provided by the Juicebox protocol to check if they are either the owner or someone who has been authorized by the owner to change their token URI resolver. And if so, they just pass the contract that they want to use instead. And when anybody, OpenSea or whomever, checks the token URI on their project, this contract will return their resolver rather than the default one. And as I said, this also allows us to update the default one if we discover a bug or want to make an improvement. So in the end, this has become the token URI resolver, this much simpler contract, like 100 lines of code. And this much more complicated one, which almost certainly has bugs and things that we'd like to improve, becomes something that is more modular and can be changed over time. So that's the ultimate structure of this contract. I have some templates we could talk about if there's time, but I guess, are there any questions?
Yeah, gang, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat and I will bring them up on screen. And while we wait for that, I guess one question I had is how does the gas look on this? See, it's quite a bit of code to get all the elements
Totally.
and slice. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't checked in a little while. I think it's like 0.15 ETH to upload everything, like to deploy both of these contracts. So honestly, not that bad, considering how much work it's doing. And I'm sure there's optimizations that could be made here. But it's not, it's not 10 ETH or something. Like I know in the initial version of what's it called? Cyber brokers, they put like 91 ETH worth of SVGs on chain in the first version. It's not that
bad. yeah, pales in comparison. And you mentioned the SVGs have hrefs on them. We haven't seen that, at least I haven't seen that used as much as it could be. Like, what's your opinion on those and whether there's like
so I have to, the one thing I haven't done here is put this on testnet yet, because things have been moving around a little bit with the protocol. I'm curious to see if OpenSea resolves them. I know that OpenSea, I don't have a good example on hand, but you can actually, like, in the metadata, you can render a whole browser and even click links and it will navigate to those links within the image here.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to work on OpenSea. I think it's a cool idea. I think ultimately someone's going to do something bad with it and the sandbox will be constrained even more. But until that happens, let's have fun.
I remember trying it last year, and it wouldn't render the links on OpenSea itself.
Oh,
but if
it
you
wouldn't?
actually,
Okay.
Yeah, but maybe something's changed now. I don't know.
I have seen them, but it was on the testnet one, so maybe they're more lenient on testnet. I'm not sure.
Possibly.
I guess I could show one last thing.
Sure.
So I added a little, for fun, I added this theming thing to the default contract. So let's see. Oh, geez, that's going to look terrible, but I'll do it anyway. Oh gosh, I have to remember what the call is. So I have a bunch of different tests and I created this theming thing. So for people who don't want to deploy their whole own metadata contract, they can just add a theme. They can set a theme for their project on this default resolver that I've created. And that just lets them change the color scheme of their metadata. Let me see if I can show you how it works. Or actually, I'll do this one. Set theme. It's going to take a second to work. And one thing I didn't mention is this FFI thing. We won't have time to go into it really, but basically a friend, this guy Jeton Connu, French dev from Quebec, is created this little FFI script that I'm using. So basically it opens the result, it uses Node to save the resulting file to the file system and then opens it in your default SVG renderer, which for me is Brave. So you can see here with the theming, I've set some horrific colors, of course, but project could change their color scheme to whatever they like, so that they can have a little bit of customization by just sending a little easy transaction with 3 values using Etherscan or Etherfunk or whatever tool they prefer.
Awesome. And I
Yeah.
guess since we're kind of coming up on time here, what's the best way for people to follow up with you if they have questions or want to learn more about developing SVGs on chain?
Yeah, definitely hit me up on Twitter is where I'm most responsive. That's probably the best place. Just DM me. My DMs are open. Otherwise, come hang out. If you're curious about the Juicebox part of this, come hang out in the Discord. It's discord.gg/juicebox. We didn't really get time to talk about it, but I do have, I'll just show quickly. If you're interested in this kind of thing for yourself, there are lots of tools out there, and these are not like the best tools, but in terms of speed to get you up and running, you can actually, this one will give you Juice SVG template in the JBX protocol, will give you a lot of the things that I talked about pre-imported. Like it gives you the capsules typeface, and it gives you the project Juicebox project handles already in the thing on different branches here. And this is a quick way to get started. And if you just want to get started with like SVGs on-chain, on-chain SVGs in the first place, let me just find the link. I did an even more stripped down version of this that really just like within 30 seconds, you just git clone this thing, you know, as everybody listening probably knows, git clone that, run forge install and yarn install, and then call this, and you'll immediately, actually I can show you right now, if you just do that, it gives you an SVG rendered in your browser right away. So you can immediately like jump in and start changing things. You know, change this to hi and remove that and call it again. And it's done. So if you're interested in on-chain SVGs but have been intimidated by it, I think this is a really nice place to start. Once you've mastered this, you can also check out Winter's HotChain SVG, which is another great tool for drawing SVGs in your favorite code editor.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicholas. Really appreciate you coming on. Yeah, this was really awesome to see, and hopefully if you were scared before by on-chain SVGs, you now have a path forward.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you all for coming to check this out, and thank you for hosting me.
Yeah, my pleasure. And just before we leave off, I want to leave our audience with a little info on our operators in the DAO. So did you know that Developer DAO's fundraising operators, Chuck and Wickest, are here to help you fundraise for your projects? In their fundraising hub on Discord, you can get support in writing grant applications, learning about fundraising, budgeting, pitching, and they can even help you introduce you to grant leads from different protocols. So if you're interested, be sure to drop by their office hours. That's held twice a week, or schedule a one-on-one with them. And with that, I want to wish everybody a very happy Friday, happy weekend, happy ETH Denver. ETH Denver kicks off today. Hopefully you're all soaking it in and not freezing it up in the minus 20 Celsius temperature. I hope you all brought coats. Yeah, I will be dropping a link for people to claim the collapse in the comments here, as well as in the Developer DAO Discord. And with that, we will see you here next week. All the best, gang.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
See ya.